Welcome to the Afterspin, opinions from thought leaders in our state. I want to ask Rick Henderson and Chris Fitzsimon. One of our panelists on a recent show speculated what would happen if there was a hurricane or other emergency that occurred right before the election or on election day. Let's take that a step further and ask what the state should do if the COVID-19 pandemic rages and threatens the elections. What do you say, Rick?
Well, for one thing, you have to remember the law and the Constitution. The Constitution says Congress shall set the date for federal elections, and our state statutes say that for federal elections, we will abide by whatever the Congress says. And so if there were something to happen that would cause extreme disruptions on election day, it would take an act of Congress, literally, to change that. Now, that's why, as we mentioned on the show, as Rufus Evanston mentioned on the show, that we're going to see huge amounts of mail ballot voting this time. And I think it will exceed 50%. I think it's going to be very, very heavy. It may possibly mean that we would have fewer voters in some areas who just insist on voting on election day. But I think that the big push from both parties, even though we don't be seeing that from the White House right now, but eventually the big push from both parties is going to be to encourage people to vote early and make sure that your vote gets in on time.
Chris, help me with this, some clarification. If you request an absentee ballot and then decide for whatever reasons that you want to go vote in person, you can still do that if you haven't sent it in, right?
That's right. Requesting the ballot doesn't mean that you're obligated to use that. And I think a lot of people are requesting it worried, understandably, that the coronavirus might be much worse as we get closer to November. Who knows? I hope not. But I do think there are a lot of people requesting these ballots. I also think it means, depending on how many people do this and how many resources the Board of Elections have, a lot of states, including North Carolina, we may, in very close races, it's going to be a while maybe before we know who wins. I think we always wait late in the night for those a lot of ballots to be counted.
If we have a raging emergency or whatever along those lines, it really could impact the outcome of these elections, couldn't it, Rick?
Oh, sure, absolutely, especially in some of the local races and down ballot races. If there is a hurricane, if there's a massive outbreak somewhere right around Election Day, it could depress turnout very strongly in specific areas. And so, as I say, that's why I think the emphasis is going to be on people to make sure, even if they don't choose to vote early, to make sure that they have the ability to do that by having a mail ballot in hand.
Chris, so far as Rick was concerned, he's absolutely correct. The election date is set by the federal Congress. If we have a situation like that, there's not much people can do about it, is there?
No, except to be ready and know going in that you probably should request an absentee ballot if you're worried about it, especially if you're a person at risk or with vulnerabilities or conditions that make you especially vulnerable. I would do that now if I was paying attention, just to be covered, whether or not you need to do that. I'm a little worried that the rhetoric from the White House about mail-in ballots and absentee ballots is making people worried about the validity of the election. There are a lot of states who have mail-in ballot voting, not absentee ballot. In fact, Utah, Mitt Romney's been elected,
right?
By mail-in vote. Nobody's saying that was an illegitimate election.
They send a ballot to everybody that's registered.
That's right.
Wow. And there's some of this where people are talking out of both sides of their mouths. They're talking about not liking mail-in ballots, and yet they are participating in it themselves. Anyway. Well, thank you for watching the Afterspin. We'll have more video all during the week on ncspin.com.